Well, more people are increasingly identifying as non-binary. This means they do not consider themselves traditionally male or female, and doctors are utilizing a technique called hormone microdosing, which helps non-binary individuals appear as neither male nor female. Joining me now is Gilbert. He's a nurse practitioner at Lyon-Martin Health Services, which provides medical care to women and transgender people in San Francisco. So Calvin, for our viewers that may not be as familiar, can you give us a brief overview of what microdosing is?
Sure. So microdosing with hormone replacement therapy is when you use a dose that would typically be thought of as subtherapeutic for someone whose goal is to transition kind of from one binary to another, or at least further in that direction than somewhere in the middle.
So you're taking smaller doses incrementally, but microdosing is a relatively new process. So what are the requirements or qualifications to receive this type of care?
So when we have folks come into the clinic, we have them sign an informed consent for hormone replacement therapy, the same one that we use for anybody who are going to prescribe any amount of hormone replacement therapy to. So it goes through kind of the risks and benefits of the different medications. And then we just have a conversation about what their goals are, and then kind of figure out what their dosing might be based on their goals, using labs to check the values. But really, the labs don't often change a whole lot if you're on lower doses. So it's really just about making sure that everybody's still safe based on their labs, they're not experiencing any of the adverse side effects, and that they are happy, that they're achieving the goals that they want to, and not reaching kind of those physical landmarks that they might not want to achieve.
Now, Calvin, given the fact that this is a relatively new concept, do we know if this is safe? Can it have long-term effects, mental or physical? Can it have long-term mental or physical effects on the health, rather?
That's a good question. And I think that there is not a whole lot of research on it still. It took a long time to get any research on hormone replacement therapy in general for the transgender population. And even the informed consent that I signed 14 years ago is very different from the one that we have people sign now, because there's actually been research done. And we do know some of the potential long-term effects, but honestly, we still don't know all of them, even if you're taking a full dose of hormones. So we definitely take into account people's medical history, their family medical history, and the same things that we would talk about if we were going to do full dosing. And there are a lot of people who have been on those lower doses this whole time, and I don't think it's always been called microdosing. I've been on a very low dose for about 14 years, and eventually you do still get a lot of the physical changes that you might expect if you were on a higher dose. It might take a little longer, which is the goal for a lot of people, is to have that time to decide, do I want to stop? Do I want to decrease my dose? Do we want to increase it a little? Do we want to switch to something else? Maybe from injectable to a topical, so you have a little more control over the amount you're having every day. I just go into it very honestly and let people know that there is not a whole lot of long-term research done. We're not totally sure about all of the potential effects, but here's what we do know. And then it's their choice to make that informed decision.
And I guess the ultimate goal is for the person to be happy in their own skin. Now, what are some of the benefits, if any, of microdosing versus traditional treatment?
I would say that you don't have to make a decision in the same way that you used to. I think when 10 years ago you were going to talk to someone about starting hormones, you actually had to say to them that you thought that you were kind of supposed to be born differently. There were a lot of things that I think people wanted to hear to feel safe enough to prescribe those hormones. I'm going to have all the surgeries. I want to completely pass as a different gender than I was assigned at birth and spent a portion of my life. And now we don't have to have those conversations that weren't always real in the first place. It's just, what are your very specific goals? They do not have to be from A to B. There's plenty of places in the middle, and you might not even know what that goal is yet. And that's okay, too. We can kind of figure it out together.
Now, given the fact that you've done microdosing yourself, even though you call it by different terms, right? That's correct. So
Yeah, no one just went up to the higher dose. Actually, no one offered it to me. I didn't even know there was a much higher dose until many years into it. And it made a lot of sense as to why some people had kind of different changes on a different timeline. But it was a good fit for me. And so it's nice to be able to have a discussion with different options.
So it was a good fit for you. Now, is this a trend that you think Americans are going to see more of in the future?
I would say, well, I don't know. Yes, I guess I think that we will, because there are so many more people identifying as non-binary or gender neutral. A lot of that language wasn't even around 10 or 15 years ago. So there are also people like myself who might have come out as trans masculine. I came out as a trans man. I thought that I wanted to look this completely different way because that was the only choice. No one gave me an option in the middle. And so I think there are some people who are even wanting to reduce the dose that they've been on for a long time because they didn't know that there was another option. Or there are people who might want to try hormone therapy who had reservations because they didn't want to see all of the physical changes. Maybe they just wanted some of them and they didn't know that that was a possibility. So yes, I would say that I think from a lot of different places, people can come to this point of wanting to try microdosing.
And certainly there are probably people who are watching this segment who are going to, educate themselves on microdosing. It's a very interesting thing. Calvin Gilbert, thank you so much for joining us on this Friday night.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.